Imagine being told your entire species is worthless, that everything humanity has ever built is a joke. That was the message Captain Jake Morrison got, 6 long months from home, staring at a fleet of ships that could wipe out Earth without breaking a sweat. His mission was to make friends, but he'd just made an enemy who saw kindness as a disease. If you've ever been underestimated, you know exactly how he felt. Stick around to see how the biggest underdogs in the galaxy decided to fight back. "What are we looking at?" Jake had asked, walking over to his science officer, Lisa Carter. Her fingers were flying across the console. "Structures, Captain," she'd said, her voice tight with excitement. "Huge ones, bigger than anything we've ever dreamed of building." Ryan Brooks, their tactical officer, had his hand hovering over the weapons panel. "Permission to arm torpedoes, Captain? Just in case." Jake shook his head. "We're here to shake hands, Ryan, not point guns." Meanwhile, Amy Rodriguez, their communications specialist who spoke 12 languages, was leaning into her console, listening to the silence between the stars. "I've got something," Amy whispered. "It's like music, but made of math." As their ship, the Defiance, crept closer, they saw it, a city of shimmering metal and light hanging in the void. Tiny, elegant ships zipped between towers that pierced the darkness. "My God," Lisa breathed. "There must be millions of them." Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the moment all of human history had been leading to. He gave the order. "Amy, send them a welcome gift, something simple. Prime numbers." Amy's fingers danced across her console, sending the universal language of math out into the void. For a moment, there was nothing but a terrifying silence. Then her station lit up. "They're talking back," she gasped. "And, oh wow, they're sending ships." On the main screen, sleek, dark vessels emerged from the alien city. They were impossibly large and moved with a silent grace that made the Defiance feel like a clumsy brick. A new message came in. It's in English," Amy said, stunned. A cold, deep voice filled the bridge, speaking a language it had learned only moments before. "Vessel of humans," the voice echoed, each word perfectly pronounced but utterly devoid of warmth. "You are in Zephyrian space. State your purpose." Jake stepped forward, his voice steady. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Defiance. We come in peace, hoping to share knowledge and friendship." There was a long, chilling pause. "I am War Prime Cathvar," the voice returned, colder than before. "Your request is illogical. You will follow our ships for inspection." Jake glanced at his crew. Lisa's face was pale. Ryan looked like he was about to jump out of his skin. "We'll cooperate," Jake said, choosing his words carefully. "We look forward to a peaceful meeting." The alien ships gracefully surrounded the Defiance, guiding them toward the massive station. Up close, the Zephyrian technology was mind-bending. Their ships had no visible engines, and the station's hull seemed to ripple and bend light. "Captain," Lisa whispered, her eyes wide as she scanned their energy signatures. "Their tech is centuries, maybe thousands of years ahead of ours. We're a museum piece to them." The docking was flawless, a silent magnetic pull that drew them into the alien world. Flanked by Lisa and Amy, Jake walked into the alien station. The Zephyrians were waiting. They were impossibly tall and slender, with skin the color of a pale blue twilight, and 4 arms that moved with unnerving grace. Their leader, War Prime Cathvar, towered over them all. "Humans," Cathvar said, his glowing eyes looking down on them with something between curiosity and disgust. "You are smaller than our historical records predicted. Your vessel is primitive. Your technology, laughable." Jake kept his tone respectful. We may be different, but we believe our differences can make us all stronger. Cathvar's eyes narrowed to glowing slits. The Zephyrian collective has reigned for 1,000 years. We have absorbed 17 species who learn to accept our superiority. We do not learn from inferiors. We're not here to be absorbed, Jake countered gently. We're here to be partners. A flicker of what looked like rage crossed Cathvar's face. He spoke to his guards in a series of sharp clicking sounds. Your words are the logic of prey, Cathvar said, turning back to Jake. Strength rules. The weak serve. There is no other way. To think otherwise is to invite your own extinction. That's when it all fell apart. Lisa, following standard scientific protocol, was using a small scanner to discreetly record environmental data. One of the Zephyrians saw it. A spy device, he hissed. They seek to steal our secrets. No, wait, it's just a recorder, Jake tried to explain, but it was useless. Cathvar's voice boomed, full of righteous fury. This is an act of aggression, a prelude to war. The humans have revealed their true nature. Alarms blared. The friendly first contact had just turned into an interstellar incident, and humanity had just been framed as the villain. Aboard his flagship, War Prime Cathvar reviewed the intelligence on these humans and almost laughed. Their pathetic little fleet was a joke. "Show me their weapons again," he commanded his sub-commander Thera. A hologram flickered to life, displaying clunky human ships that looked like they were held together with bolts and prayers. Their weapons were simple lasers and missiles. "They look like children's toys," Cathvar sneered. "Our smallest fighters are twice the size of their command ships," Thera reported. "Our shields can withstand their full arsenal without a scratch. Their armor is paper." "And their military?" Cathvar asked, enjoying the report. "A mess, War Prime. They are not a unified people. They argue amongst themselves. Their colonies operate independently. There is no discipline, no grand strategy." "Perfect," Cathvar purred. "How many ships can they even muster?" "Perhaps 200 combat-ready vessels. We have over 3,000 warships poised to attack." This would be the easiest conquest yet. For 1,000 years, the Zephyrians had followed a simple, brutal formula. Find the weak, crush them with overwhelming force, and absorb the survivors. These humans would be number 18. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, Admiral Patricia Hayes stared at the grim faces around the command table. The news from the Defiance had sent a shockwave through the solar system. "What's our timeline?" President Martinez asked, his voice strained. Colonel Ben Parker pointed to a star chart. "Their fleet is moving slowly, almost arrogantly. They don't see us as a threat. We have maybe 6 weeks before they hit our outer colonies." Dr. Helen Cross, the head of weapons research, spoke up. 6 weeks might be just enough." "Enough for what?" Admiral Hayes demanded. "We have experimental projects," Dr. Cross explained. "Adaptive AI fighters, cloaking technology that's purely theoretical, and a new kind of weapon designed to find microscopic cracks in energy shields. Nothing has ever been tested." The president looked horrified. "You're telling me our only hope is a bunch of untested science projects?" Colonel Parker shook his head. "Not just weapons, sir," he said with a grim smile. "We also have a secret weapon they'll never see coming, our incredible ability to be underestimated. We have tricks up our sleeve that the Zephyrians know nothing about. Our intel says they've watched us, but they've only seen the show we put on for them." Admiral Hayes stood and walked over to the massive display screen lighting up the galaxy. Red dots swarmed across a huge portion of space, marking Zephyrian territory. In comparison, the scattered blue dots of the human colonies looked like a handful of tiny islands in a vast hostile ocean. "Explain that," she said, her voice tight. "The Zephyrians think they get human warfare because they've spied on our training drills and watched our public military parades, but they have no idea about our classified programs. They don't understand how humans truly fight when our backs are against the wall and survival is on the line. Doctor, Cross nodded, his expression grim. Every single species they've conquered fought by a set of rules, honor codes, formal battle lines, predictable tactics. But humans, we were trained in a different school. What school? The president asked, leaning forward. Earth, Colonel Parker said with a deadpan simplicity. We spent thousands of years fighting each other. We learned that survival is worth more than honor. We learned to adapt, to use every single advantage, and to get dangerously creative when we're outmatched. Far out in the deep black, the Zephyrian fleet glided toward human space with an air of casual, unbeatable confidence. War Prime Keither had decided to start with the smallest human colonies first. He would snuff them out one by one, letting a wave of terror wash over human space before he moved on to their main worlds. His first target was a little mining colony on Kepler 442b. According to his intelligence reports, it was home to only 50,000 humans and had no military defenses to speak of. It was supposed to be an easy first strike, a simple way to kick off the conquest. When the Zephyrian attack fleet dropped out of warp near Kepler 442b, they expected to find terrified colonists scrambling to surrender. What they found instead just confused them. The human colony was there, but it looked different. Weird energy signatures were pulsing from the surface. New defensive structures had popped up, seemingly overnight. War Prime, his tactical officer reported, the humans have modified their colony. We're picking up weapon systems that don't match any of our records. Keither felt a flicker of annoyance, not concern. Impossible. Our intel is clear. They have no advanced weapons. Attack. Now. The Zephyrian ships surged forward, but the battle was nothing like they'd anticipated. Human weapons opened up from hidden emplacements. The colonists had turned their heavy-duty mining lasers into deadly cannons. Old cargo haulers suddenly boosted from behind asteroids, flying in chaotic patterns that violated every rule of military doctrine. But the most shocking thing of all was the raw desperation and wild creativity the humans fought with. They used tactics the Zephyrians considered completely dishonorable. They targeted supply ships. They weaponized the colony's industrial machinery. They even rammed their own damaged ships straight into Zephyrian vessels. After 6 grueling hours, Keither was forced to order a retreat. He'd lost 12 ships with dozens more heavily damaged. The little human mining colony was still standing. How is this possible? He demanded of his officers. They are primitives. Their technology is inferior. War Prime, his second-in-command Dextra said carefully, perhaps our intelligence was not as complete as we believed. These humans, they fight differently than any species we have ever faced. Keithar's anger boiled over. Different how? They don't follow proper military protocol, sir. They use any method available to them. They have no concept of honor or tradition in a fight. You mean they fight like animals? Keither sneered. No, War Prime, Dextra replied quietly. They fight like survivors. Keither stared at the tactical display, at the blinking red icons of his lost ships. For the very first time in his long and decorated military career, he felt a sliver of doubt. Maybe these humans were more dangerous than he'd thought. But his pride wouldn't let him even consider it. The Zephyrian collective had never failed to conquer an enemy. They wouldn't fail now. Prepare the main fleet, he commanded. We will show these humans what real military power looks like. His officers scurried to obey, but as they left, several of them shared worried looks. The easy victory they had been promised was quickly turning into something else entirely. Back in the Sol system, Tony Phillips wiped sweat from his brow as he worked on the underbelly of the cargo ship Morning Star. 3 weeks ago, this ship had been hauling grain between colonies. Now, Tony was helping turn it into a makeshift warship capable of taking on the Zephyrian forces. "Hand me that plasma welder," he called to his assistant. All around him in the massive orbital shipyard above Mars, dozens of other engineers were doing the exact same thing. Every civilian ship that could fly was being retrofitted for war. "Tony, you've got to see this," Maria Santos, another engineer, called out. She was holding a piece of Zephyrian tech that had been salvaged from the battle at Kepler 442b. "I think I figured out how their shields work." Tony scrambled out from under the ship and looked at the alien device. It was smaller than his fist, but pulsed with technology that seemed light years ahead of their own. "What did you find?" "Their shields are incredibly powerful," she began, "but they have a blind spot. They're designed to stop high-energy weapons and big projectiles, but they don't seem to handle lots of small, simultaneous impacts very well." "What are you saying?" Maria grinned. "Remember those ancient Earth weapons they called shotguns? The ones that fired a spray of tiny pellets instead of one big slug? I think we can use the same principle." A spark of understanding lit up Tony's eyes. "Scattershot weapons. We fire hundreds of small projectiles at once." "Exactly," she said. "Their shields can stop a missile, but they can't stop 1,000 tiny pieces of metal hitting them all at the same time." All across the solar system, moments like this were happening. Human engineers and scientists were working around the clock, finding clever, low-tech ways to fight a high-tech enemy. They couldn't match the Zephyrians' firepower, but they could find cracks in their armor. On the bridge of the converted cargo ship Iron Will, Captain Sarah Kim stared at her tactical display. For 10 years, she'd been a civilian pilot. Now, she was in command of a squadron of 12 converted freighters, all crewed by volunteers who'd never seen a space battle in their lives. "Captain," her comms officer said, his voice tense, "we're getting a report from Scout Group 7. Zephyrian forces are on a direct course for the Titan colony." A knot of ice formed in Sarah's stomach. Titan. Her sister lived on Titan, along with her family. Over 2 million colonists called that moon home. The Zephyrians had already wiped out 3 smaller colonies, and each attack was more brutal than the last. "Time until they arrive?" she asked. 18 hours, Captain." Sarah looked at the faces of her crew on the bridge. They were farmers, miners, teachers, and shopkeepers who had signed up to fight. None of them were soldiers, but every single one of them knew what would happen if the Zephyrians weren't stopped. "Set a course for Titan," she ordered, her voice firm. "And send a message to the entire squadron. Tell them it's time to see if our new bag of tricks actually works." Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the human fleet's command center. After the disastrous first contact, he'd been put in charge of all of humanity's defense forces. The weight of that responsibility was crushing. "Status report," he said. Colonel Parker walked over with a datapad. "We have 67 converted ships combat ready, sir. Another 100 are still being worked on. Our new scattershot weapons are untested in a real fight, but the simulations look good." "And the Zephyrian fleet?" "They're moving in 3 main battle groups. The biggest one is heading straight for Titan. The other 2 are hitting mining outposts in the asteroid belt." Dr. Cross joined them. "Admiral, we've finished installing the new AI combat systems. They should give our ships a massive edge in battle coordination." Morrison nodded. The AI systems were humanity's ace in the hole. While Zephyrian ships were powerful, they relied on a rigid, top-down command structure. Every ship had to wait for orders before acting. But the human ships, guided by the new AI, could think and react instantly, moving together like a swarm of angry hornets. "There's more," Dr. Cross added. We've been monitoring their communications. They still don't have a clue what they're up against." "How so?" "They keep calling us dishonorable and primitive. They think our unconventional tactics are a sign of weakness, not strength. They have no idea that humanity has been preparing for this kind of war for our entire bloody history." Morrison thought about that history. Thousands of years of constant conflict had taught his species some very hard lessons. They'd learned that survival was more important than pride. They'd learned to use every advantage, no matter how small. And they'd learned to adapt on the fly when facing a stronger foe. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 other species, but all of them had fought by the same old, predictable rules. They had met their enemies in so-called honorable combat, ship against ship, following ancient codes of warfare that humans had thrown out centuries ago. Humans didn't have codes like that anymore. They just fought to win. The battle for Titan began at 800 hours. The Zephyrian fleet arrived, fully expecting another easy slaughter. Instead, they found Captain Kim's squadron of ugly, converted freighters waiting for them. The human ships moved in ways that baffled the Zephyrian commanders. Instead of forming neat battle lines like proper warships, they scattered, attacking from every direction at once. They used the dense asteroid field around Titan for cover, darting out to strike before vanishing again like ghosts. "Fire scattershot weapons," Sarah ordered. The Iron Will, the Morning Star, and their sister ships unleashed shimmering clouds of tiny, high-velocity projectiles, Model C. Zephyrian shields, built to deflect missiles and energy cannons, were useless against a hailstorm of tiny metal shards. Projectiles tore through their defenses, crippling several alien warships. "Impossible!" bellowed War Prime Keithvar from the bridge of his flagship. "How are these primitive weapons getting past our shields?" His tactical officer looked baffled. "Sir, the humans are firing swarms of small objects, not single large ones. Our shields just aren't designed to handle that kind of assault." A hot rage swelled in Keithvar's chest. First, the fiasco at the mining colony, and now this. These humans didn't fight like a civilized military. They relied on cheap tricks and deception instead of honorable combat. "All ships focus fire on their largest vessel," he commanded. But the human ships were like ghosts, never staying still long enough to lock onto. They darted in and out, using hit-and-run tactics that drove the Zaprian gunners mad. Whenever they tried to chase one ship, two more would appear to attack them from behind. The battle raged for 4 hours. By the end, the Zephyrians had lost 8 ships, with many more heavily damaged. The human squadron? They had only lost 2. Titan was safe. Keithvar stared at the tactical display, his mind refusing to accept what he was seeing. He had better technology, bigger ships, and overwhelming firepower. And yet somehow, these primitive humans had outsmarted him again. "War Prime," his intelligence officer interrupted. "We're getting the same story from our other battle groups. Human forces are using unpredictable tactics across every front. They don't fight like any species we've ever encountered." Keithvar finally realized this easy conquest was turning into a real war, but his pride wouldn't let him admit that these humans could be a genuine threat. "Send for reinforcements," he ordered, his voice tight. "We will crush these insects with overwhelming force." But as the words left his mouth, Keithvar felt a cold knot in his stomach he'd never known in his long military career. For the first time, he wasn't sure he would win. The space around New Geneva was a ghost town of shattered starships. Twisted chunks of metal tumbled through the blackness, some still glowing red from the explosions that had ripped them apart. On the bridge of his flagship, the Retribution, Admiral Jake Morrison watched the last Zephyrian attack crumble. War Prime Keithvar had thrown everything he had left into this final desperate battle. Over 1,000 warships had descended on the human fortress world, planning to wipe out the resistance for good. Instead, they had sailed straight into the most elaborate and devastating trap in the history of warfare. "Give me a status report," Morrison said calmly. "The enemy fleet is down to 300 active ships," his tactical officer replied. "They're attempting a retreat, but our pursuit squadrons are cutting them off." Morrison gave a slight nod. The humans had learned a lot about Zephyrian tactics over the last 6 months of war. The aliens were fatally predictable. They always attacked in the same patterns, used the same formations, and followed the same rigid, ancient rulebook. Their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. On the bridge of his battered flagship, War Prime Keithvar watched the tactical display with a growing sense of dread. His magnificent fleet was being systematically dismantled by creatures he had arrogantly dismissed as primitive animals. The very ships that had conquered entire star systems were now being torn to shreds by retrofitted cargo haulers and mining vessels. "How is this happening?" he roared. "We have superior weapons, superior armor, superior everything." His surviving officers glanced at each other, their eyes wide with fear. None of them dared to be the one to tell their commander the truth, but the evidence was screaming at them from every screen. "War Prime," his intelligence officer began cautiously. "The humans, they fight differently than any species we've ever met. They don't follow any standard military doctrine." "Explain," Keithvar snapped. "They use deception, ambushes, and highly coordinated group tactics. Their ships function together as if they're a single living creature with countless moving parts. Our ships wait for individual orders from command. Theirs seem to think and act on their own, while still perfectly serving a common goal." Keithvar's rage boiled over. "So you're saying they fight without honor, without a proper military structure?" "Yes, War Prime, but their methods are terrifyingly effective." The truth, however, was even worse than his officers suspected. The humans had spent months poring over captured Zephyrian technology and interrogating prisoners. They learned exactly how the Zephyrian command structure worked, how their ships communicated, and most importantly, how their officers thought. A brilliant science team led by Dr. Helen Cross discovered that Zephyrian military strategy was completely locked in place by thousands of years of tradition. They never changed their tactics, because to them, change was a sign of weakness and dishonor. They operated on the simple belief that superior technology and unwavering discipline would always crush an inferior foe. But humans had no such sacred traditions holding them back. When frontal assaults failed, they tried attacking from the side. When energy weapons bounced off, they invented kinetic ones that punched right through. When a single ship was too weak, they networked dozens of them to fight as a unified swarm. Marine Commander Kate Sullivan led her troops through the eerie corridors of a captured Zephyrian cruiser. The boarding action had been a brutal, chaotic fight, but her soldiers had adapted on the fly to the strange alien environment. "Clear the next section," she ordered into her comms. "And remember, these guys have forearms, but they have no idea how to handle close-quarters combat. Stay nimble and use your training." The Zephyrians were masters of space combat, but they had never encountered anything like human infantry tactics. Human soldiers were heirs to centuries of brutal warfare on Earth. They knew how to fight in confined spaces, how to use cover, and how to operate in small, lethal teams. Kate's squad moved through the alien ship like ghosts. The Zephyrians, accustomed to formal battles with clear lines and rules of engagement, had no answer for human guerrilla warfare. Back on the bridge of the Retribution, reports of victory were flooding in from every corner of the battlefield. The human forces were winning everywhere, not because they had better weapons or bigger ships, but because they had a completely different philosophy of war. "Admiral," the communications officer announced, "we're getting a hail from the Zephyrian flagship. War Prime Keithvar wants to speak with you." Morrison stood a little straighter. This was the moment he had been working toward since the very first shot was fired. "Put him on the main screen." The image of War Prime Keithvar flickered to life. The alien leader looked utterly defeated, his face a mask of confusion. The arrogant pride was gone, replaced by an expression Morrison never thought he'd see on a Zephyrian commander: doubt. "Human Admiral," Keithvar began, his voice strained with emotion he could barely control, "I demand you tell me how you accomplish this. Your species is primitive. Your technology is a joke. Your ships are nothing more than converted civilian craft. How did you defeat the mighty Zephyrian collective?" Morrison let the question hang in the air for a long moment, looking straight at the broken alien leader. He thought of all the human colonies that had been burned to ashes, of all the innocent lives lost simply because the Zephyrians believed their power gave them the right. "You want to know how we won?" Morrison's voice was quiet but filled with steel. "You studied our ships and our weapons, but you never bothered to study us. You thought you understood human warfare because you watched our carefully staged training exercises and our formal military parades." Keithvar's glowing eyes narrowed. "Your military displays were a chaotic mess. They showed only weakness." "Those displays showed you exactly what we wanted you to see," Morrison countered, "but you never saw what humanity is truly like when its back is against the wall. You never learned about our real history." "What history?" Keithvar asked. Morrison took a step closer to the screen. "We spent 10,000 years learning how to fight on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We battled ice ages, super predators, plagues, and most of all, we battled each other. We learned that survival means you adapt, you innovate, and you do whatever it takes to protect your own." "That is not honorable warfare," Keithvar spat. "Honor?" Morrison's voice turned to ice. "You glass civilian colonies from orbit and call it honorable. You demand the surrender of people who never even knew you existed and call that proper military procedure. You want to know what real honor looks like?" Keithvar fell silent, waiting. Morrison leaned in, his eyes blazing. "Real honor is defending those who can't defend themselves. Real strength is finding the wisdom to show mercy to an enemy you have utterly defeated. And when someone threatens everything we love, when someone gives us the choice to either surrender or die." The Admiral's voice dropped to a lethal whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "You want a war? You will get annihilation." The words struck Keithvar like a physical blow. In that instant, he finally understood. He understood what his people had awakened. Humans weren't just another species to be conquered and added to their collection. They were something else entirely, something the Zephyrian collective had never encountered in 1,000 years of conquest. They were survivors who had learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to keep the peace is to become exceptionally good at war. War Prime Keithvar slumped in his command chair, staring at the ghosts of his once invincible fleet on the view screen. Only 50 ships remained of the 1,000 that had jumped into the system. His officers stood in stunned silence, too afraid to even breathe. The great Zephyrian collective, rulers of 17 conquered species, had been broken by a race they had laughed at, a race they had called primitive. "War Prime," his communications officer said softly. "Admiral Morrison is requesting your response to his terms of surrender." Keithvar closed his glowing eyes, bracing for the worst. But the human's terms were not what he had expected. Any other species would have demanded total submission, slavery, or extinction. But Morrison had offered them something else, something that confused the Zephyrian commander even more than the defeat itself. The humans had every right to wipe them from the stars. The Zephyrans had attacked without warning, shattered their colonies, and been absolutely ruthless. But now, with the Zephyrian fleet crippled and defenseless, the humans weren't demanding surrender or submission. They were offering peace. They were offering to treat the wounded Zephyrian soldiers and give the survivors safe passage home. On the bridge of his burning flagship, Kethvar stared at the terms. "They could annihilate us," he said to his few remaining officers. "Why are they showing mercy?" His intelligence officer, Sub-Commander Theora, scanned her reports. "War Prime," she began. "I've been studying their culture throughout this conflict. I think I understand. Humans don't fight for glory or conquest. They only fight to protect themselves. Once the threat is gone, they would rather build than destroy." Kethvar couldn't wrap his mind around it. In Zephyran culture, victory was about total domination. The strong ruled the weak. It was the only way they knew. "Are you telling me," he asked, bewildered, "that they are this good at war because they hate it?" "Yes, War Prime," she confirmed. "They're masters of war because they know its true price. They understand that even in victory, everyone suffers." Meanwhile, on the bridge of the human flagship Retribution, Admiral Morrison waited patiently for the Zephyran reply. His crew was on high alert, ready for anything. The aliens could choose to fight to the last ship, or they might try one final desperate kamikaze run. Admiral Dr. Cross spoke up. "I'm monitoring their comms. They're arguing. Some of the hardliners want to keep fighting, but it seems most of them know it's over." Morrison gave a slow nod. He could almost feel what the alien commander was going through. Kethvar had been raised his entire life on the belief of Zephyran superiority. Accepting defeat from a species like humanity must feel like his world was ending. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we have an incoming transmission from the Zephyran flagship." "Put him through," Morrison ordered. Kethvar's face appeared on the main view screen. The alien warrior looked a decade older, as if the battle had drained the very life from him. "Admiral Morrison," Kethvar said, his voice heavy, "I accept your terms. The Zephyran fleet will leave human space, and we will not return." A wave of relief washed over Morrison. The war was over. But alongside the relief, he felt a flicker of something he didn't expect. Empathy for the enemy who had caused so much pain. "War Prime," Morrison said, his tone softening, "I need you to understand something. We don't hate your people. We fought because you left us no other choice. But we find no joy in this victory." Kethvar's mandibles shifted in a way Morrison's computers translated as pure confusion. "I don't understand. We are your enemies. We leveled your colonies. We killed your people." "Yes," Morrison agreed quietly. "You did, and we won't forget that. But there's a difference between justice and revenge. We defended our homes and we stopped your advance. For us, that is enough. Every other species we've conquered begged for mercy when they lost. You're offering mercy when you've won. Why?" Morrison chose his next words with care, because strength without wisdom is just mindless destruction. Because an enemy today could be a friend tomorrow. He paused for a moment. And because that's what being human is all about. The next few hours were surreal. The Zephyran ships, broken and battered, began their slow retreat. But first, human medical shuttles zipped over to help treat their wounded. Human engineers offered assistance, helping patch up the worst of the damage on the alien vessels. The very same people who had been fighting for their lives just hours before were now working to make sure their former enemies got home safely. From the bridge of her converted cargo ship, Captain Sarah Kim watched it all unfold. She saw human and Zafran crews, speaking through translators, working side by side, and was blown away by how fast the hate could fade. "Captain," her comms officer said, "we're getting a hail from the Zephyrin cruiser Star Forge. They want to personally thank our medical team." Sarah couldn't help but smile. Maybe this is how real peace started. Not with grand treaties signed by politicians, but with small moments of kindness between two people who were supposed to be enemies. 3 months later, Admiral Morrison was in his office on Mars, reading through the latest galactic reports. The war was over, but the ripples were just starting to spread. Countless other alien civilizations had been watching the conflict, and they had seen the unstoppable Zephyrin Collective get beaten by a race they'd never even heard of. And now, they wanted to meet these humans. But unlike the Zaphyrins, these new races approached with curiosity and respect, not arrogance. They had learned a valuable lesson. Humans might seem small, but they were not to be trifled with. The Andromedan Trade Federation had already sent envoys to several colonies. The mysterious crystalline consciousness offered to share scientific data. Even the reclusive Voidwalkers, who almost never spoke to anyone, had made contact. Dr. Cross walked into Morrison's office, holding a data pad. "Admiral, you have to see this. We have applications from over 30 different species requesting to establish diplomatic relations." Morrison stared at the list, his eyes wide with wonder. 6 months ago, humanity was completely alone in the galaxy. Now, it was suddenly at the heart of a brand new interstellar community. "There's more," Dr. Cross said, a grin spreading across her face. "The Zephyrin Collective sent an official ambassador. They want to set up trade agreements and cultural exchange programs." "Is it Kethvar?" Morrison asked. "No, sir. Someone new. A young Zephyrin named Veltar. He's part of a new generation that believes his people can learn from us. Apparently, our actions at the end of the war started a massive debate across their entire society." Morrison smiled. Change was hard, especially for a proud warrior race like the Zephyrins. But maybe, just maybe, their defeat had taught them the most valuable lesson of all. Later that day, Morrison stood on the observation deck of the main space station, just looking out at the stars. He saw human ships drifting peacefully alongside vessels from a dozen different species. Alien diplomats in strange, beautiful robes walked the corridors next to human scientists in simple lab coats. He had started as Captain Jake Morrison, the explorer, dreaming of peaceful first contact. Then he became Admiral Morrison, the warrior who had to save his species. But now he was becoming something else entirely, a builder of the peace that came after the storm. The galaxy was a vast, incredible place, and humanity was just getting started. But for the first time, they would face the future with friends at their side, including old enemies who had finally learned to respect them. Because that's what humans do. They survive, they adapt, and they never, ever give up on the hope that tomorrow can be better than today. Years later, that hope had a name: the New Horizon. Captain Jake Morrison stood on its bridge, watching a new alien world fill the view screen. After 6 long months in deep space, they had arrived. Below them, a planet of brilliant blue oceans was dotted with floating crystal cities that shimmered in the sun like scattered diamonds. "Sir, we're picking up signals from the surface," said Amy Parker at the communications console, her fingers flying across the controls. A strange, beautiful sound filled the bridge, a melody that sounded like a mix of music and whale song. It was beautiful, almost haunting. Dr. Lisa Barnes gazed at her science station, her eyes wide with wonder. "Captain, These readings are off the charts. The cities are literally floating, and the energy signatures, it looks like they're powered by some kind of living biological system. Commander Ryan Hayes, the ship's tactical officer, double-checked his weapons displays. Just as ordered, everything was powered down. This was a mission of peace, humanity's first true attempt to make friends with a new species. No guns, no threats, just open hands and hopeful hearts. "Take us into a stable orbit, Ben," Jake said to his pilot, Lieutenant Ben Clark. The ship glided forward, its engines a quiet, steady hum. 3 days later, Jake was in a small shuttle, descending toward the planet. The beings below had invited them to meet in one of their floating cities. As the shuttle passed through the cloud layer, the sight that greeted them stole Jake's breath. The city was a masterpiece, unlike anything a human could even imagine. Crystal spires grew out of the water, linked by bridges that looked like they were woven from pure light. Gardens full of softly glowing alien plants floated in the air between the buildings, and underneath it all was the music. The entire city seemed to be singing. The shuttle touched down on a platform that seemed to be made of living coral. When Jake and his team stepped out, they were met by beings straight out of a fantasy. They were tall and slender, with smooth skin that shimmered through all the colors of a rainbow. Their faces were gentle and wise, with large, dark eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. One of them glided forward. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of the city's song put into words. Amy's universal translator quickly interpreted. "Welcome, travelers from the stars. I am Harmony of Depths. We have been expecting you." Jake took off his helmet, breathing in the sweet, clean air. It smelled of ocean salt and 1,000 unknown flowers. "I'm Jake Morrison, captain of the human ship New Horizon," he said. "We come in peace. We hope to learn from your people and to share our own knowledge with you." Harmony of Depths smiled, and her skin glowed with a bright, warm light. "Peace is the only song we have ever known, Jake Morrison. Come, let us show you our world." The hours that followed felt like walking through a dream. The aliens, who called themselves the Vashi, guided the humans through their living city. Everything was alive. The buildings weren't constructed. They were grown from living crystal that hummed and responded to the Vashi's songs. The floating gardens weren't a trick of technology. The plants themselves could manipulate gravity with their root systems. Dr. Barnes was practically vibrating with excitement. "How do you get the crystals to grow like this?" she asked a Vashi scientist named Current of Joy. "We sing to them," the Vashi replied, her skin shifting to a warm yellow that the translator labeled as happiness. "What would you do if you came home to find your entire world gone?" That's the nightmare Captain Jake Morrison was about to face. His crew had just made the most incredible discovery in history, the Vashi, a species that lived in perfect harmony with their planet. Every living thing had its own song, and the Vashi had learned to sing with the crystals, making them grow to meet their needs. Their technology was breathtaking. Ben Clark watched in awe as they showed him power grids that ran on the planet's magnetic field, boosted by the natural electricity of sea creatures. A young Vashi engineer named Depth Singer explained, "No pollution, no waste. Everything gives back. It's the way of harmony." Meanwhile, Ryan Hayes spoke with Vashi historians who were fascinated by humanity. They were shocked by our stories of war, not with judgment, but with a deep desire to understand. They wanted to know how a species that knew so much pain could overcome it and still reach for the stars. "Your people have suffered greatly," a Vashi leader named Harmony of Depths told Jake as they strolled through a garden of singing flowers. "But you didn't let that pain break you. You used it to become stronger, to connect with others. This is a wisdom we can learn from." Over the following weeks, genuine friendships blossomed.
Jake would spend hours with Harmony of Depths, swapping tales of Earth's past for lessons on Vashi philosophy, a culture built on art and music that could heal the body and the soul. Dr. Lisa Barnes collaborated with Vashi scientists, trading human medicine for their unbelievable biotechnology. Together they figured out how to grow crops that could thrive anywhere and create cures by literally singing to diseased cells until they remembered how to be healthy again. Amy Parker, the communications officer, worked with their linguists. She wasn't just building a better translator, she was learning a language of color and sound. The Vashi didn't just speak, their entire bodies communicated, with shifts in skin color and musical tones creating layers of meaning words alone couldn't capture. The Vashi were just as captivated by humanity. They fell in love with our music, from the intricate patterns of Bach to the raw soul of the blues. They marveled at our art and stories, at how we could create such profound beauty from struggle and chaos. Ben Clark found kindred spirits in the young Vashi engineers. They spent their days merging the best of both worlds, combining the Vashi's self-healing organic technology with human breakthroughs in energy storage and space travel. After 2 months, Jake knew this was more than a mission. It was the dawn of a new era for humanity. They hadn't just found intelligent life, they had found true friends who valued peace, beauty, and the well-being of every living creature. The Vashi felt it too. Harmony of Depths confessed to Jake that her people had always sung to the stars, believing that one day others who shared their love for harmony would answer. "You are the friends we have been singing for across generations," she said, her skin glowing a deep blue of profound joy. "Your arrival is the final verse to a song our ancestors began." When it was time for the starship, the New Horizon, to leave, 3 young Vashi volunteered to be ambassadors to Earth. Melody of Stars, Current of Joy, and Depth Singer could barely contain their excitement to see Earth and meet more humans. The entire Crystal City turned out for a farewell, singing a song so powerful it made the towering buildings ring like giant bells. Standing on the bridge, Jake watched the beautiful planet shrink into a sparkling jewel. In the cargo hold, they carried gifts that would change humanity forever. Memory crystals filled with Vashi science and music, seeds from their magical floating gardens, and samples of their healing crystals. "Set a course for home, Ben," he said, his voice thick with pride. They were carrying the greatest news in history. Humanity was not alone, and their new friends were everything they could have ever hoped for. The 3 Vashi ambassadors stood with him, their skin shimmering with anticipation. They longed to see the blue-green world that had given rise to such a fascinating species, to meet the billions of people who created art that could move them to their core. As the New Horizon leaped into faster-than-light travel, Jake Morrison smiled. The future had never been brighter. Together, humanity and the Vashi would build a friendship that would echo across the stars and bring peace to the galaxy. Behind them, the Vashi city sang on, now with a new verse celebrating their human friends and the incredible future they would all share. 8 months later, the ship finally dropped back into normal space, gliding into their home solar system. Jake stood on the bridge, a familiar comfort washing over him as he watched the stars of home grow brighter. Beside him, the 3 Vashi ambassadors were practically pressed against the viewport, their skin glowing with excitement. "Soon we will see your beautiful Earth," said Melody of Stars, her color shifting to a brilliant gold. "We have dreamed of this for so long." Current of Joy hummed a soft, happy tune that seemed to make the very walls of the ship vibrate in harmony. "We cannot wait to share our songs with your people." At the communications console, Amy Parker was frowning. "This is odd, Captain. I'm getting no response from Earth traffic control.
Try the Mars colonies,
Jake ordered, a knot of confusion tightening in his gut. It was unthinkable for Earth to be silent. They had sent countless messages ahead, announcing their historic return with humanity's first alien guests. The entire solar system should have been throwing a party. Still nothing from Mars, sir, Amy reported, her voice strained. Trying the asteroid mining outposts now. Dr. Lisa Barnes looked up from her sensor readings, her face pale. Captain, I'm not detecting any of the usual radio signals from Earth. No TV, no internet. Just silence. A cold dread began to creep up Jake's spine. Something was terribly wrong. The solar system was quiet, stripped of the endless, comforting chatter of civilization. Ben Clark double-checked his navigation, his knuckles white. Sir, our position is confirmed. That's Earth right ahead of us. But I'm showing zero orbital traffic. No ships, no stations. Nothing is responding. Ryan Hayes pulled up the long-range optical sensors, and all the color drained from his face. Captain, you need to see this. The main view screen flickered, then resolved into an image of Earth. But it wasn't the vibrant blue and green marble they had left behind. The planet hanging in the void was a sickly brown and gray, covered in angry red splotches that pulsed like open sores. The ice caps were gone. The oceans were a dead, oily black. No, Jake whispered, his voice cracking. That can't be real. The three Vashi ambassadors recoiled, making sounds of pure horror as their skin turned a dark, grieving gray. Depth Singer collapsed, overwhelmed by the sheer psychic scream of a murdered world. Amy's hands trembled as she scanned all emergency frequencies. I'm picking up automated distress signals, hundreds of them. They all say the same thing. The attack started 6 months ago. 6 months. Right after they had left the Vashi system, Lisa Barnes was frantically running scans, her face a mask of disbelief. The atmosphere is choked with radiation. The oceans they're boiling with nuclear fallout. Surface temperatures show impacts from energy weapons strong enough to flash melt solid rock. Ben Clark's voice was a choked whisper. The moon. God, look at the moon. Earth's constant companion was mutilated, scarred with fresh craters the size of continents. Huge chunks had been blasted away, leaving it looking like a shattered skull. Mars, Ryan said, his voice flat, his training kicking in to keep him from breaking. Put Mars on screen. The red planet was even worse. Something had cracked it open like a walnut. The massive Valle Marineris Canyon was now a gaping wound that plunged toward the planet's core. Its atmosphere had been completely blown away into space. Jake collapsed into his captain's chair, the full weight of the apocalypse crushing him. 8 billion people, gone. His parents, his little sister, his friends from the academy, the school children who had drawn pictures for them to show the aliens. The old woman down the street whose roses he loved, all of them, just gone. The weapon signatures, Lisa said, her scientific mind desperately clinging to data as tears streamed down her cheeks. I'm analyzing the energy residue in the debris fields. Amy was sobbing quietly, listening to the last ghosts of humanity. They're mostly automated warnings now, but I found a few recordings. From the last moments. They say the attackers came out of nowhere. Ships just appeared and opened fire. Captain, Lisa's voice cut through the grief, suddenly sharp and cold with a terrible certainty. I recognize these weapon signatures. We've seen them before. Jake looked up, his eyes hollow. Who? He asked. The Kronak Empire, she replied. The energy patterns are a perfect match for the data we gathered 3 years ago when we tried to open diplomatic channels with them. The Kronak. Jake remembered.
a warlike reptilian race that had sneered at humanity's offer of friendship. They had called humans weak, chaotic, a plague unworthy of leaving their own planet. The talks had ended with a threat. The galaxy would be a better place without humanity in it. But nobody believed they would do this. Nobody imagined they were capable of wiping out an entire species. As Amy monitored the fading signals, she realized the truth was even worse. Her voice was choked with a mix of fury and sorrow. "Captain, I'm patching into Chronoc military channels. They're celebrating." "What?" "They're broadcasting it across their entire empire, the footage of the attacks. They turned the annihilation of Earth into a spectator sport for their people." On the main view screen, the intercepted Chronoc feed flickered to life. Jake watched, paralyzed, as alien creatures raised glasses of bizarre liquid in a toast, with images of Earth's burning cities playing behind them like a victory montage. He saw Chronoc officers roaring with laughter as they displayed trophies looted from human starships. A child's worn teddy bear, a pair of wedding bands, a collection of family photos. They're calling it the cleansing of the inferior species. Amy's voice trembled with rage as she went on. "They're planning a victory gala on their homeworld, a festival to honor wiping us out." Current of Joy let out a sound that was half a scream, half a funeral dirge, a noise so filled with agony it made the ship's hull vibrate like a struck bell. Melody of Stars had lost all her vibrant colors, her skin fading to a flat, hopeless gray that screamed despair. Depth Singer spoke for the first time since they'd seen what was left of Earth, her voice cracked and empty. "We felt it when it happened 6 months ago. We felt a great silence sweep through the cosmic song of life. We thought it was just sadness because we missed our new friends. But it was death. The death of 8 billion voices all at once." Jake pushed himself to his feet. All around him, his crew was breaking. Ryan Hayes, the tough-as-nails military man, had his head buried in his hands. Ben Clark was just staring at the screen showing Earth's corpse, his eyes completely vacant. Lisa Barnes was running calculations with a robotic focus, as if keeping her hands busy could wall off the grief. Amy Parker looked up from her console, her eyes bloodshot. "Captain, I'm picking up a handful of human ships out in deep space, explorer vessels, like us, that were too far out to return home. There aren't many, maybe a dozen ships in total, a few hundred survivors out of 8 billion. We're the last humans in the universe." The weight of that truth landed on Jake's shoulders like a collapsing mountain. They were all that was left, the last of Earth's children. "The Chronoc made one critical error," Jake said, his voice as cold as the vacuum outside. "What's that, sir?" Ryan managed to ask. "They left some of us alive." The 3 Vashi ambassadors turned their large, wise eyes toward him, and in those eyes, Jake saw an emotion he never expected to see from the famously peaceful aliens: rage. A deep, smoldering rage mixed with a profound sorrow for their murdered friends. "What do we do now, Jake Morrison?" Harmony of Depths had taught Melody of Stars to ask this when faced with an impossible choice. Jake gazed at the dead world that was once his home, at the cratered moon where his grandmother had worked until the day she passed. He looked at the empty orbit where Mars once held the promise of human colonies, filled with the sounds of children's laughter. "Now," he said, his voice like the dead of winter, "we teach the Chronoc what happens when you murder humanity's friends." The New Horizon pivoted away from Earth's silent grave and set a course for the deepest, darkest space. Behind them, the solar system mourned. Ahead of them lay a galaxy that had no idea what humanity was capable of when it had nothing left to lose. In the ship's corridors, 5 humans and 3 aliens began plotting a response that would make the stars themselves tremble.
The Cronach wanted a victory party. Earth's last children were going to make sure it turned into a funeral.
The era of human diplomacy had just ended. The age of human vengeance had just begun. The new horizon drifted silently through the void, far from the light of any star. Inside, in what used to be the diplomatic chamber, 6 beings were gathered around a table. It felt less like a meeting room now and more like a council of war. Jake Morrison studied each face. His crew had been transformed in the 3 weeks since they found Earth's tomb. Ryan Hayes had deep, dark circles under his eyes and only spoke when absolutely necessary. Ben Clark serviced the ship's systems with a grim efficiency, his smile gone forever. Amy Parker was glued to the Cronach comms, her expression twisting with hate every time she heard their laughter. But Dr. Lisa Barnes had changed the most. The warm, kind scientist who had been so thrilled to meet new life forms now spent every waking hour digging through top-secret military archives, searching for weapons capable of species-level extinction. "We need to accept reality," Jake said softly. 5 humans and 3 Vashi can't win a war against an empire that controls dozens of star systems. A direct attack is just a suicide mission. Melody of Stars spoke, her skin shimmering with colors Jake had never seen before, dark, angry shades. "The Cronach believe they've won. They think every last human is gone. They don't know about us." "That's our one advantage," Ryan chimed in, his tactical mind kicking into gear. "They aren't looking for survivors. Their defenses are built to stop fleets, not ghosts." Current of Joy, who had been silent since they left the solar system, finally spoke, her voice like shattering glass. "In our culture, we have legends of the dark song. When a truly great evil is committed, the universe itself sings a song of retribution to restore the balance. We never thought those stories were real." "Maybe they weren't," said Depth Singer, her skin pulsing with strange rhythmic light. "But they are now." Lisa Barnes brought up a file on the table's holographic display. "I've been reviewing every Black Ops project in the human archives. We developed some truly monstrous weapons during our own wars. Things so horrifying that every nation on Earth agreed to lock them away forever." Jake scanned the list of project names. He'd never heard of most of them, but their descriptions made his blood run cold. Genetically targeted viruses, self-replicating nanites that could devour any material, bombs capable of destabilizing stars. "These were designed by people who understood total war," Lisa continued. "People who knew that sometimes you have to do something awful to prevent something far, far worse." Ben Clark leaned forward. "With some heavy modifications, the ship's fabrication units could build most of these." "It won't be easy, but I think it's possible." Amy Parker pulled up another display showing Cronach chatter. "I've been analyzing their command structure. Their arrogance is off the charts. They genuinely believe they are untouchable. Which means their internal security is designed to stop conventional attacks from other empires," Ryan added. "Not unconventional attacks from a species they already wrote off as extinct." Jake got up and walked to the room's viewport, staring out at the endless sea of stars. Somewhere out there, the Cronach were toasting the murder of his world. They were laughing about the children who would never grow up, the artists who would never create, the lovers who died holding one another. "What does this turn us into?" he asked the silence. Melody of Stars glided to his side, her skin now a pattern of colors that spoke of grim resolve mixed with deep sorrow. "We are becoming what we must to honor those we lost. The Cronach made their choice when they attacked Earth," said Current of Joy. "They chose to be monsters. Now they have to live with the consequences of that choice." Depth Singer rose, her body glowing with a harmonic energy that made the very walls of the ship hum.
Our people have been at peace for millennia. We have never initiated harm, but you humans, you taught us something profound during our journey together. What's that? Jake asked. You taught us that some things are worth fighting for. Love is worth fighting for. Friendship is worth fighting for. And the memory of the dead is worth fighting for. Lisa Barnes pulled up a new screen. I found something in the Cronach Intercepts. They're planning that massive party on their homeworld, the Victory Festival, to officially mark the extinction of humanity. Amy nodded. It's set for the 1-year anniversary of Earth's destruction. Every single high-ranking Cronach official will be there. Military leaders, politicians, cultural icons, their entire leadership, all in one place. How many people are we talking about? Ryan asked. Their own broadcasts are boasting that over 50 million Cronach are expected to attend. They're calling it the single greatest celebration in their history.
Jake turned from the window. Then that's our target. We won't just be aiming to kill them. We're going to send a message to the entire galaxy.
What kind of message? Ben asked. That there are lines you do not cross. That friendship is sacred. And that if you hurt the people we care about, you will pay a price that is beyond your darkest nightmares. Lisa highlighted the weapon files again. I've been working on a new concept, a synthesis of human biotechnology and Vashi harmonic science. It's not designed to just kill them, it's designed to make them understand what they did to us. Explain, Jake commanded. It's a virus, one that forces the infected to psychically experience the final moments of every single person who died on Earth. 8 billion deaths, felt all at once. It won't be an instant death. It will shatter their minds with the sheer weight of their crime. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even Jake felt a wave of nausea at the thought of such a weapon. Is that who we are now? Amy asked, her voice barely a whisper. Are we becoming monsters just like them? No, Jake said, his voice firm. We will never be like them. Monsters kill for sport. We're doing this for justice, for memory, for love. Current of Joy began to hum a soft tune, a melody that was as beautiful as it was heartbreaking. In our oldest legends, the universe always finds a way to balance the scales. A great evil will always call forth a great response. The Cronach have broken the balance of everything.
We are the universe's answer to their evil, Melody of Stars declared, her skin shimmering with the colors of unshakable conviction. For the next few hours, they plotted their revenge. This wouldn't be a war fought with armies and fleets. It was going to be a campaign of shadows, of creeping terror, and of absolute psychological collapse. They would use the Cronach Empire's own arrogance as a weapon against them. Ben Clark would rewire the ship's systems, transforming the New Horizon from a peaceful exploration vessel into a phantom that could slide past any defense. Lisa Barnes was tasked with creating weapons that would make the Cronach curse the day they ever learned the name of humanity. And Amy Parker would wage a war of information, seeding fear and paranoia deep within the Cronach communication networks. Ryan Hayes would map out their strikes with a surgeon's precision and a hunter's patience. The three Vashi would bring their advanced biotechnology to the table, along with their knowledge of harmonic frequencies capable of shattering both mind and body. What's our timeline? Jake asked, his voice low. 9 months until their big celebration, Amy replied. 9 months to get ready. That gives us 9 months to become something this galaxy has never seen before, Jake said, his eyes hard. We'll be Earth's ghost, haunting every last Cronach who had a hand in our world's murder. Depthsinger rose, her body glowing with a renewed sense of purpose. We will sing the dark song together, humans and Vashi as one. We will teach the galaxy that friendship is sacred, and anyone who dares to destroy it will face a reckoning beyond their darkest nightmares. Jake scanned the faces around the table one last time. These people, both human and alien, were the last remnants of the greatest alliance in galactic history. The Kronak had tried to shatter that friendship with fire and death. They had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The Kronak wanted to throw a party for the end of humanity, Jake said, his voice as cold and empty as the void between worlds. We're going to make sure their celebration becomes their funeral. The New Horizon altered its course, pointing its nose toward Kronak space. Behind them, the silent grave of Earth shrank into the distance. Ahead lay 9 months of preparation for a vengeance that would echo across the stars for generations. The Kronak Empire had no clue that their victims' best friends were coming for them. They had no idea that love, twisted by grief, could become more dangerous than any weapon ever conceived. They were about to find out. 2 years had passed since the day Earth died. The New Horizon was a far cry from the ship that once carried diplomats and scientists to build bridges across the cosmos. Ben Clark had rebuilt it from the hull in, turning it into a specter that could drift through space unseen. But the crew had changed even more than the ship. Jake Morrison now walked the corridors like a caged predator, his eyes cold and sharp. The hair at his temples had turned silver, and a smile was a foreign thing on his face. When he spoke, his voice seemed to carry the weight of 8 billion tombstones. Ryan Hayes had become part soldier, part ghost. He could slip through enemy bases without a whisper, leaving only death behind him. His military discipline had been honed into something far darker, far more lethal. Dr. Lisa Barnes didn't look like a scientist anymore. Her hands were stained by chemicals that could sterilize entire worlds, and her eyes held a chilling knowledge that would have horrified her younger self. She had become Earth's angel of vengeance, engineering plagues that would make the Kronak pray for an oblivion they'd never find. Amy Parker spent her days swimming in Kronak networks, expertly planting lies and stoking fear. She could turn commanders against their most trusted allies, twisting their paranoid military culture into a weapon that consumed itself. The three Vashi had gone through the most profound transformation. Melody of Stars, Current of Joy, and Depth Singer no longer glowed with the bright, peaceful hues of their youth. Their skin had shifted to deep, brooding blues and purples, colors that signaled their embrace of the dark song, a power their ancestors only spoke of in hushed legends. Their first target was a Kronak research station on the fringe of the Empire. It was a place where human prisoners had been brutally interrogated before Earth was wiped out. Jake insisted on leading the strike himself. The Kronak guards never even knew he was there. Jake moved through the station like a phantom, wielding silent weapons that left no mark. When the station's security teams finally came to investigate the eerie silence, they discovered empty rooms and a single message scrawled in human blood on the commander's office wall. Earth remembers. The message shot through Kronak military channels like a virus. Who could have done this? Every human was supposed to be dead. Yet their own scientists confirmed the genetic material was real. Dr. Barnes was next. She set her sights on a Kronak military academy where young officers were taught how to subjugate lesser species. Her bioweapon was a symphony of calculated cruelty. The virus she unleashed triggered unimaginable pain in every nerve ending, but was designed never to kill. For 3 weeks, an entire graduating class of Kronak's finest writhed in pure agony, screaming for a death that refused to come. When the torment finally subsided, they were left alive but shattered, their minds permanently broken by the memory of a suffering they couldn't comprehend. The Academy's medics found another message, this one etched into the main computer system. This is how Earth's children felt as you murdered them.
Ben Clark's sabotage was quieter, but just as devastating. He slipped into Kronak shipyards and planted tiny devices that caused their brand new warships to suffer catastrophic system failures on their first flights. Entire fleets found themselves dead in space as their engines failed, their life support flickered out, and their communications went dark. When rescue crews finally arrived weeks later, they found sailors driven mad by the silence and the fear, raving about voices in the walls that whispered the name Earth.
The Vashi were terrifyingly good at psychological warfare. Current of Joy used his people's harmonic gifts to broadcast frequencies that drove Kronak soldiers to insanity. The sound waves were tuned perfectly to disrupt their brain chemistry, causing vivid nightmares, hallucinations, and total mental breakdowns. Depthsinger found that certain sonic patterns could actually vibrate Kronak exoskeletons apart from the inside. Entire platoons were found dead in perfect formation, their bodies shattered by a sound that had turned their own skeletons against them. Melody of Stars had a different specialty. She could project harmonics that made the Kronak hear the ghosts of their victims. Officers would suddenly hear human children crying for their mothers. They'd hear lovers whispering final goodbyes. They'd hear artists humming tunes that would now never be finished. But Amy Parker's information war might have been the most damaging of all. She forged evidence in Kronak military databases suggesting that decorated commanders were plotting coups. In a culture built on suspicion, these digital seeds of distrust grew like weeds. Kronak generals started arresting their own top officers for treason. Military units fired on each other, convinced they were rooting out traitors. The Empire's own internal security began to tear itself apart. Every strike was like a scalpel, precise, clean, and utterly untraceable. The attacks materialized from nothing and disappeared like smoke. The Kronak military started calling their unseen enemy the Ghost of Earth, never once imagining that 6 individuals on a single modified ship could bring an entire empire to its knees. Kronak soldiers began refusing posts at remote outposts. Officers begged for transfers away from any base that had been hit. The empire's military readiness plummeted by 30% as a plague of fear swept through the ranks. "Something is hunting us," one terrified Kronak general reported to his superiors. "Something that knows our weaknesses, our fears, and all our guilty secrets. It attacks without warning and leaves nothing but death and madness in its wake." The Kronak High Command scrambled to keep control, but even they were starting to fracture under the relentless psychological assault. Every day brought new reports of impossible attacks, of bases wiped out by weapons that left no trace, of entire garrisons found dead or insane with messages about Earth carved into the walls. "We killed them all," the Kronak Supreme Commander roared during an emergency council. "Every human world is cinders. Every ship is wreckage. There are no survivors." But the evidence told a different story. Human DNA at the scenes, human languages on the walls, references to a human culture that was supposed to be extinct. Somehow, against all logic, Earth's children were still out there, and they were incandescent with rage. Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair, scrolling through the latest intel Amy had pulled from the Kronak networks. Panic was spreading through their empire like a disease. Military divisions were demanding reinforcements. Entire planets were begging for more security. The mighty Kronak were beginning to see ghosts in every shadow. "How many more targets before the main event?" he asked. 17 major strikes, Ryan reported. "We've hit 63 facilities in total, each one more crippling than the last." Lisa Barnes glanced up from her lab where she was putting the finishing touches on something special for the Kronak home world. "The bioweapon is almost ready." We had just 1 month left for final checks and tweaks. Ben confirmed the ship's upgrades were finished. We can slip past their tightest security nets now. They'll have no idea we're coming. Current of Joy hummed a low, resonant tune, and the ship's frame seemed to thrum with restrained energy. Our dark song gets louder with every verse we write, she sang. Soon, it will be time for the grand finale. Amy brought up a star map highlighting the Kronak capital. Their big celebration is in 4 months. And get this, despite all our little raids, they're still going through with it. They actually believe their home world is untouchable, that the ghost of Earth can't reach them. A smile finally broke through Jake's stony expression, the first in ages. It wasn't a kind smile. Good. Let them believe it. Let them gather every last one of their leaders in one spot. Let them feel arrogant and safe. He rose and walked to the main viewport, staring out into the star-dusted blackness. Out there, the Kronak were trying to sleep, haunted by nightmares of a vengeful ghost. Out there, they were double-checking their locks, glancing over their shoulders, terrified of when Earth's ghost might strike again. They wanted a party to celebrate wiping out our people, Jake said, his voice a low whisper. We're going to give them a party that will echo through eternity. The New Horizon glided through the void, a silent vessel carrying 6 souls who'd been reforged into something the galaxy had never witnessed. They were no longer just human and Vashi. They were something new, a hybrid born from friendship and hardened in the inferno of unimaginable loss. They were the wrath of Earth, and their terrible symphony was nearly complete. Koraketh, the Kronak homeworld, loomed in the darkness like a heavily armed fortress. A necklace of orbital defense platforms, each capable of vaporizing entire armadas, encircled the planet. Squadrons of patrol ships executed flawless sweeping patterns, hunting for any trace of the phantom that had plagued their empire for 2 long years. But the New Horizon slipped through their web like a ghost. Ben Clark's masterful retrofits rendered the ship completely invisible to their scans, while a set of flawlessly forged Kronak clearance codes told their defense grid it was just another luxury shuttle arriving for the Victory Festival. From the bridge, Jake Morrison watched the planet swell on the main view screen. Its surface was a tapestry of sprawling cities, all constructed from grim black stone and dark metal. In the capital, Karn Moor, 50 million Kronak were massing to commemorate the single greatest achievement in their long, brutal history, the total annihilation of the human race. "Everyone ready?" Jake asked, his voice steady. Dr. Lisa Barnes gave a firm nod from her station. "The bioweapon is primed and linked to their atmospheric processors. Once I hit send, it will blanket the entire globe in under 6 hours." Amy Parker ran a final diagnostic on her comms panel. "I own every satellite, every broadcast tower in this system. Just say the word, and I can send this show galaxy-wide." Ryan Hayes confirmed the status of the quantum charges. "The devices are in position. They're not designed to crack the planet, but they'll reshape it into a lesson the galaxy won't ever be able to ignore." The 3 Vashi stood as one, their skin shimmering with hues deeper than the void itself. They had spent weeks weaving their voices into a single, powerful instrument that could deliver their message across the stars. "The dark song is complete," Melody of Stars stated, her voice resonating with harmonies that made the very air vibrate. "Every living soul in this galaxy will hear our lament today." Down on the planet, the festivities were hitting their peak. Colossal screens across Karn Moor replayed the final fiery moments of Earth's destruction, a looped snuff film for the cheering crowds. Kronak officials delivered impassioned speeches celebrating the glorious extinction
of a weak and inferior species. In the city's heart, a towering monument had been forged from the molten slag of human starships. Kronok children played tag around its base, their games mimicking the slaughter of humans. Street vendors hawked souvenirs crafted from artifacts plundered from Earth's ruins. Jake watched it all through the ship's external sensors, his expression unreadable, as if carved from granite. All around him, his crew made their final preparations for the moment they had bled and sacrificed for over 2 agonizing years. "It's time," Jake announced softly. Amy Parker seized control. In an instant, every screen in Karn Moor, every speaker, every communication device went dead. The entire planet was plunged into an eerie silence. Then a single image began to materialize on every display across the city, across the empire, and on every public network across the known galaxy. It was the face of Captain Jake Morrison, broadcasting from the bridge of the New Horizon. Behind him, his crew, a unified front of human and Vashi, stared out with eyes burning with a cold, righteous fire. When Jake spoke, his voice was carried to every intelligent being in the cosmos, instantly translated into 1,000 different languages by Amy's carefully prepared systems. "People of the galaxy," Jake began, his tone a terrifying mix of calm and fury. "My name is Jake Morrison. I am one of the last humans. 2 years ago, the Kronok Empire murdered my species. 8 billion men, women, and children were incinerated, their only crime being that they existed. On the world below, 50 million Kronok gawked at their screens, stunned into silence. The ghost of Earth finally had a face, and it was speaking to them from somewhere just beyond their sky. The Kronok butchered our friends," Jake went on. "They turned genocide into a spectator sport. They cheered for the deaths of children. They built monuments from the ashes of our homes." The view widened, revealing the 3 Vashi standing shoulder to shoulder with the humans. "These are our friends. The Vashi came to Earth in peace, hoping to connect our 2 worlds. Instead, all they found were our graves, but friendship doesn't end with death, and love is not erased by murder." Jake's voice dropped, becoming as hard and cold as deep space. "Your mistake was not killing all of us. You left witnesses, and this is Earth's reply to your celebration." Dr. Barnes triggered her payload. High above Koraketh, invisible pods burst open, releasing their contents into the upper atmosphere. The bioweapon descended like a gentle morning fog, silently touching every single Kronak on the surface within minutes. At first, there was nothing. Then, the screams began. The agent Lisa had engineered wasn't meant for a quick death. No, it forced every infected Kronak to live through the final terrifying moments of every single human who died when Earth was destroyed. 50 million Kronak were suddenly drowning in the collective terror of 8 billion souls facing their end. They felt the panic of children screaming for parents who were already gone. They felt the heartbreak of lovers perishing in each other's arms. They lived the despair of artists watching their life's creations turn to dust. They endured the hopeless fury of soldiers fighting an unwinnable war. They felt all of it, all at once, a psychic storm that would rage in their minds for eternity. For the Kronok commanders who gave the orders, it was infinitely worse. They were forced to experience every single death they had personally caused, every life they had extinguished, every future they had stolen. Their minds completely shattered under the crushing weight of 8 billion agonizing goodbyes. As the Kronok collapsed in torment, Ryan Hayes activated the quantum charges seated deep within the planet's crust. The devices set off a chain reaction, transforming Koraketh's entire surface into a single, perfect living crystal, freezing every Kronak in their moment of agonizing empathy for all time. The world became a monument of crystallized torment, where the Kronak would remain fully conscious, forever reliving the pain they had inflicted, unable to die, unable to forget. But the Vashi's part was more profound than any weapon. The three of them raised their voices in a haunting melody that pulsed across subspace, reaching the farthest corners of the galaxy. It was a song of grief for humanity, a song of love for their friends, and a chilling warning to any race that might dare to walk the Kronak's bloody path. The song's harmonics were tuned to shatter the hulls of any Kronak ships that tried to flee the system. But more than that, it carried a story that would become a legend, an epic poem whispered among the stars for generations. The song told of Earth's kindness, of a vibrant culture snuffed out too soon, of dreams turned to ash. It sang of a love that knew no species, of a bond that death itself could not sever, and of a justice that would always eventually find its mark. As the crystal planet of Koraketh settled into its final glittering form, Jake sent one last broadcast to the galaxy. "Earth had friends," he said, his voice echoing to countless worlds. "Earth taught us about love. Earth proved that different peoples could live as one. The Kronak tried to destroy that gift. So remember Koraketh. Remember this frozen tear in the darkness, and remember the price for making humanity's friends weep." The New Horizon banked away from the crystalline tomb that was once the Kronak homeworld. Behind them, the planet glittered in the void like a frozen scream, a permanent, silent warning against the arrogance of hate. The ship pointed its nose toward the galactic rim, carrying the last humans and their Vashi allies toward a new, unknown future. With them, they carried the genetic seeds and cultural archives to one day, somewhere far away, bring both of their species back to life. But what they carried was something far more precious. They held the profound understanding that friendship was a sacred trust. They knew that love could tear down any wall, and that some connections were worth defending at any cost. For generations to come, as new civilizations first ventured into space and met others, they did so with caution and a deep sense of respect. They had all heard the legend of Koraketh, all gazed upon the crystal planet that served as a timeless warning. The galaxy had finally gotten the message. Friendship isn't a weakness. Love isn't a mistake, and anyone who dared to shatter either would face a reckoning beyond their wildest nightmares. The children of Earth were gone, but the justice they stood for would echo for eternity. And in the vast, silent emptiness between the stars, the Vashti's anthem still hummed its message for all who would hear. Some ties are thicker than blood or species, some loves outlast even death, and some payback can wait an eternity. The last of the humans and their allies journeyed into the great unknown, carrying the potential for new homes and the memories of the old one. In their wake, they left a galaxy that would never again confuse a kind heart for a weak one, or think friendship was something you could simply crush without consequence. The victory party was over. The real lesson was just beginning.